everything after this should be live on the YouTube channel.
Thank you, David. Good morning. I'm Cynthia Schendel, and I serve as co-chair of the Social Work Advisory Committee of the Kansas Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. I ask the members of the advisory committee to respond to a roll call to signify their presence at this open meeting that is being conducted remotely by conference call and other electronic medium. Andrea Perdomo Morales.
Present.
Donna Honer Quayle.
Present.
Sarah Behrens. Mary Gill.
Present.
Mike Gillette.
Yep, present.
Leanne Gingery.
Present.
Angie Heller-Workman. Jane Holstrichter. Catherine Reck.
Present.
Eric Schonecker.
Present.
Robin Unruh. I note that the
Present.
following, oh, great, sorry, didn't see you there, Robin. I note that the following BSRB staff members are also present: David Fye and
Here.
Leslie Allen.
Present.
Next, David Fye will read a message concerning this meeting being held remotely.
Thank you, Cynthia. And I didn't hear a response during the roll call from Jane, but I do see her on the Zoom, and so I'll go ahead and make sure that she's noted as being present. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And so my name is David Fye. I'm the Executive Director for the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. Public comment allows the public to address the advisory committee about its concerns, but the Kansas Open Meeting Act, or KOMA, does not require the advisory committee to provide public comment or answer questions from individuals. Individuals requesting to provide public comment could contact the Executive Director prior to the meeting by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov. There will be no public comment at this meeting, as no individuals had requested to provide public comment. Because we are conducting this public meeting remotely by conference call and other teleconference ability, I state for the record the following information. Public access to this meeting is conducted by interactive communication that allows members of the public without cost to attend the meeting through the use of the conference call and on the board's YouTube channel. The meeting is conducted remotely, but the requirements of KOMA are not suspended, so we will be conducting this meeting pursuant to the KOMA. On December 15th, 2023, we sent notice of the advisory committee meeting to all individuals who had requested such notice of meetings. The notice was also posted on the board's website, ksbsrb.ks.gov. You may obtain a copy of the notice at that website. An agenda and other meeting material have been posted on the board's website and are available for review. You may also request a copy of the agenda specifically by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov with the subject line "Request for the agenda," and it will be sent to you. The notice contains information for the conference call and the YouTube channel that allow members of the public to attend the meeting free of charge. The notice also states that if we have any technical issues during the meeting, you may call the board office at 785-296-3240 or send an email to bsrb@ks.gov. A recording of the meeting will be available on the BSRB YouTube channel following the conclusion of the meeting by using the link to the meeting on the agenda. And the conference call line is active. I did check it before we got started, and there is no one currently on the conference call line.
Thank you, David. The meeting's now called to order, and the advisory committee will begin its discussion of the first item on our agenda. And that would be approval of the agenda. Has everyone had a chance to look at it? Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
I would move to approve.
Thank you, Donna. A second? Thanks, Leanne. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Thank you. The agenda is approved. And now we are going to have an update on the ASWB license exam by Lavina Harles, who's Senior Director of Examination Services for ASWB. And thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me and for the invitation. We're always happy to provide information to our members about what we're doing at the association and how we are actively evolving the competence assessment for the profession. So happy to do that. I'm ready to share my screen if that is okay. If we're ready to roll.
Yes, that should be enabled for you.
Okay, great. Okay, there you go. Can you see that there?
Yes.
It says update. Okay, great. Thank you again for the invitation. My name is Lavina Harless. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I have been with the Association of Social Work Boards now for almost 19 years and have been working in mostly roles that are in examination development. So I'm looking forward to talking with you today. I want to just level set with a few things here before we get started on the updates of why measuring competence using an exam. This is essential to your regulatory duty as board members to verify minimum competence of the candidates for whom are up for licensing. This exam is an objective component of your licensing decisions, and it is continuously vetted through a multitude of research and validation studies to make sure that we are testing that entry to practice first day on the job of minimum competence. We follow the standards developed through educational and psychological testing through the APA, the American Educational Research Association, the National Council on Measurement. So this is the gold standard and guidance on how to develop high-stakes licensing exams. It's the same kind of standards that are used for nursing exams, physical therapy exams, medical exams. So this is what the ASWB uses again to develop their examinations, to make sure that they are valid, measures what they're supposed to measure, that they're reliable under similar circumstances. Scores will be similar over time, and they're compliant. Again, they meet those industry standards and can be defended on your behalf if challenged. Okay, and I think we just talked about that. So exam categories, you all know that there are multiple categories of the exam, and you all license at certain categories that may be different from this list, but these are the exams that ASWB offers and specifically what their purpose is for. So what is ASWB doing from our sector of the professional system? We want folks to understand that this is a systems issue, which is going to take changes in multiple systems. ASWB wants to do what it can do in that entry to practice space. But there's a multitude of experiences that are carried throughout an individual's journey as they make their way through social work education to entry to practice and then to competent practice when you all get the chance to regulate them through that space. So again, we wanted to say that this is a journey and everyone on the journey has a responsibility to equity in this space. So for us, what are we doing? These are some things that you all are aware of, I believe, but I want to make sure that I bring them back up, that we launched a free exam resources for educators suite. That was back in late 2022. And so for educators to help their students be equally prepared to show competence on an assessment. Multiple things we put together, from a training on how to write test questions to a guide with sample questions that can be shown in the classroom, to additional data on how candidates are performing on the major content domains of the exam. So really trying to be as transparent as possible, because these types of resources were charging for those in the past, and we really want to make a conscious effort to partner with educators in this space around what free resources we might be able to provide to help them help their students. Again, in the spirit of transparency and education, we launched a webinar series on the exam and different facets of the exam. We did that in late 2022, and that continued through last year. These are all on the ASWB website. We actually have another webinar coming up here on Thursday to talk about some additional research that we are doing and that we have conducted with individual social workers around licensing. So lots of information there. Again, those are recorded, so you can take a look at those. We are doing quite a bit of research and undertaking quite a bit of research as we look at re-envisioning what the competence assessments will look like in the future. One of the pieces is a test mastery mindset support. So this is a resource that we're actually offering to candidates that began at the beginning of last year. Candidates who are unsuccessful on the examination can work with this independent company, and this is free for candidates, and they can work with this independent company and look at their test mindset skills, if they were prepared, if they felt like, their mindset may have gotten in the way of being able to demonstrate their competence on an assessment. So we have actually a wealth of information right now from candidates who took this program and used it and said that it was very useful to them over the past year. And so we're going to be producing a report so folks can kind of see where candidates are landing with their mindset when they show up for the exam and what that looks like as well. And that will help us, again, inform additional supports and resources that might be within our purview to be able to offer. Community conversations, that's the research that we are going to be covering this Thursday with our research consultants from HUMRO. So this was a focus group effort. It was a qualitative research study that was conducted last January through May, again, with independent researchers, not with ASWB, to talk with social workers about their journey across the profession and through licensing, concerns that they had, issues that they thought needed to be looked at around maybe how the assessment is built, how they found the assessment, along with licensing kind of concerns. So we have a wealth of knowledge there that we're getting ready to present on, and that report is out on our website if you are interested in looking at that. Again, all of these pieces are informing how we will move forward with the evolution of the assessment research. Is another piece, and we had an RFP for regulatory research last year. We awarded it to 3 different research groups around the importance of a competence assessment for licensing of the profession, and what that profession will look like over time with continuing the licensing exam. The Social Work Workforce Coalition, this is a group of social work leaders that we have pulled together to promote the idea of a social work census. So this is our next practice analysis, which will be expanded to a social work census and is being promoted from across the profession. So we can finally have a very robust workforce study for the profession. It is not something that our profession has really invested in or focused on, and we feel like this is a great way for us to give back to the profession while updating the competence assessments as well. So that is the social work census launching in 14 short days. And we are excited to be promoting that. That is one of the largest efforts, again, that ASWB is undertaking, and that will help us update the content for the next round of exams as well. And the more people we get to participate in the census, the more validation that our content will have for the exams, and the more information we will actually be able to have about the workforce and share broadly with the social work profession, so that we can, again, give that research back to the profession as we continue to work with social workers. So in terms of exam updates, what does this mean? What is the timing? What is ASWB doing, and what does that look like? So for 2024, as we are on this journey of re-envisioning the competence assessment, you may or may not know that we changed vendors from Pearson VUE. We were with Pearson VUE for 18 years, and it was time for a change. PSI began administering examinations in January of this year. One of the main drivers for moving to another vendor was around offering online remote proctoring. And this is something that we have had as a goal for accessibility for candidates for quite some time. And PSI has transitioned over 80 different groups like ASWB to remote online proctoring. So that was the goal of kind of going along with PSI. So right now, those tests are being given in the brick and mortar sites. But later this year, the plan would be to transition to have an option for candidates. So if they wanted to take it in a brick and mortar site, they may do so. But if they wanted to take it in the comfort of their home, as long as they had the technology, and there's a list of what those look like. And I think a lot of folks, certainly after the pandemic, and I think through that, have updated their technology. So the hope is that folks will find this as an accessible, positive solution for them. And so that should be coming later in 2024. And like I said, 14 days from now, we are launching the social work census, and hope that you all will promote that as well. And we have some things that we're going to be sending David, and a toolkit for promotions and things like that, so you can put this out on your website. Then the practice analysis. So this is a group of volunteers that are brought together. This happens every 5 to 7 years. As we build the competence assessment, we have to update the assessment every 5 to 7 years to make sure that we are testing what is happening in the field at that time. So the beauty of this is the task force is going to take this enormous set of data, hopefully, and be able to pull together what I would hope that would be the most inclusive blueprint outlines that we've ever created. The last time we did this back in 2017, we had over 23,000 social workers fill out this practice analysis. And our hope is, now that we have elevated it to a census and we want to promote it broadly across the profession for licensed and unlicensed social workers, that we will be able to glean a lot more information from social workers about what the profession is doing. Some other initiatives that you need to be aware of: we are establishing a scholarship program for repeat test takers. So right now, earmarking money to go into a fund so that we can start thinking about how to assist folks with repeat test taking. We are also exploring additional assessment models. One of the kind of main models that we're looking at would be shifting to a modularized version of the exam, which would look like separate sections of the exam that a candidate would have to take. If they were unsuccessful on one part, they would only need to retake that one part of the assessment instead of doing the entire assessment all over again. So that is one of the main pieces that we are looking into in terms of evolving the structure of the assessment as well. So, here's the webinar series, just so you all can see kind of what the topics have been. One is really talking about those resources that we developed for educators, and we are continuing to look at what additional resources we could develop that might be helpful. Another one was about the psychometrics in exam development, the measurement piece, kind of the nerdy research part, and working with our partners on what that looks like to make sure our exams are valid and reliable. And then what access and equity look like when we are talking about candidates who maybe need ADA accommodations or special testing arrangements for a specific condition or other issue. And here is our community conversations coming in just a couple days here. So, all right. Let's see. So PSI, this is their landing page, and they are very pro candidate experience. We are hoping to have a positive experience with the candidates. It has been positive so far, as we are continuing to work with PSI. So we will continue to keep you updated, but we are headed toward that remote proctoring goal. Here are the free resources for educators. Again, just a suite about those, and you're welcome to look back. All of this information is on our website to connect with educators to help their students. So, as you heard, there's lots of research happening around the community conversations, focus groups, looking at different ways to assess competence, funding regulatory research to have more information, analyzing test takers' needs through this test mastery mindset program, and then conducting this social work census, our practice analysis. That is all going to feed into this creation of being able to build the content outlines and anchor forms, and that should happen in 2025, setting the passing standard for the new assessment and making that as inclusive of a process as possible. That will be our goal for setting that, and then developing the updated competence measures based on hopefully at least double the amount of input that we received from the last time. Our CEO is saying 100,000, and that's where she wants our goal to be. So it'll be interesting to see where we can where we land on the number of folks who fill out the census. And so then implementation, we would be launching those updated competence assessment measures in 2026. Introducing option for secure online remotely proctored testing, that's supposed to happen this year. Offering additional resources to help close performance gaps. We are doing that currently with the work that we are doing through the test mastery mindset, the work with educators, and continuing to look at what additional resources we can provide. And we are also looking at analyzing pass rates over time for progress, and there will be more analysis and contextualization of that data coming out very soon as well from ASWB. Here's our practice analysis task force. We invited double the amount of folks to participate in that. These are volunteer social workers working in the field, educators from across the US and Canada who are helping or helped develop that survey of social work practice. And they are going to look at the data when it comes back and help us again form the most inclusive blueprint that we have created around the exam. So social work census, it launches March 1, social work month. Our logo is Social Workers Count. And I actually have a little pin here that says Social Workers Count. So we're going to be sending some of these to David and a pack of stickers. So for you all to promote this among your constituents. And this is going to run 3 months from March till May. And there is the website. It's actually socialworkcensus.org. I'm not sure where that com got in there. So Social Work Workforce Coalition, this is the group of folks that we've pulled together to help promote and get behind the idea of a workforce census. So we should be able to see all of these organizations kind of participating in the promotion of the census when it launches next month. Again, just to break this down, to make sure you're clear on what the census is, it's kind of doing two things. We call this feeding two birds with one scone, right? This is the workforce study, so who social workers are, and that is going to be published for use by the profession, information on demographics, careers, student loan debt, current salary, those kinds of things that we can give back to the professional association and say, here's some good advocacy points for where we might want to focus our advocacy efforts for the profession there. So that's a great way for us to give back again to the profession, and then we'll still conduct our practice analysis led by us, which will be infused through the census, and that is knowledge needed to practice safely and ethically first day on the job. And that's how we will develop the competence assessments for the exam. So that is the plan for the social work census. Oh, and here you can take a look at any of our regulatory research proposals that were accepted. Ooh, I keep clicking. So these are the regulatory kind of research proposals that we accepted through the regulatory research committee at ASWB, and we're continuing research around the assessment as I've spoken about specifically. We are entering a contract with Howard to do some HBCU research on candidates who have been unsuccessful with the exam, who have graduated from Howard, and then candidates who have been very successful, and kind of what the what those factors were, what those pieces might have looked like, so we can kind of understand those differences. So again, just more research and finding out more information about these different pieces. There's that test mastery mindset that I talked with you about, fifth theory. That has been a very positive additional support for candidates, and they have been helped, I would say, by this. We don't have data tying it back to it improving pass rates at this time because we really just piloted it for a year last year, but we're going to continue the program. So we anticipate we'll see some expansion in this program of being able to offer it to folks who have not even taken the assessment yet. We wanted to focus on people who were unsuccessful and see what that mindset looks like. We're going to open it up more broadly here in the future. Okay, those community conversations. We ended up getting about 600 people who participated in person, online, through a self-paced survey. So, and we are excited because that links to a lot of our plans and helps us kind of fill out our roadmap for how we are going to move ahead. Don't forget about this compact and the initiative of the Council of State Governments to address barriers in licensure, mobility, and portability for the profession. And we are partnering, of course, with NASW and CSWE with support from the National Council of State Governments. So here's kind of how that would work. Not sure if you've seen this kind of model, but a social worker lives in state A and wants to work in any compact member state, and they would be able to do that with that interstate compact license. So we have benefits of the licensure compact. I think you all probably know this because we have legislation introduced in Kansas. Here's all the places where we've had legislation introduced around the compact as of February of this year. So this Missouri was the first state to enact the compact for social workers, but we are really excited that so many states are interested in this and making the profession as mobile as possible. So that's exciting. Thank you. Those are all the updates. That's what we've been up to. That's what's been happening with the exam program. Lots of things occurring at ASWB, but happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Good morning. Thank you, Lavina, for that overview and exciting information. I was wondering if you would be able to share a little bit about what you all are learning from the Fifth Theory pilot program.
Yeah, so right now we don't have the full year of I would say data and that report out, but what I know from looking at those quarterly reports from them is that there is with folks who are unsuccessful on the examination, there is a mindset issue, and so there is a problem where they are underprepared, I would say, and also showing that their mindset gets in the way of being able to take the exam. So what can we do right in our space to kind of get them in the right mindset to take a competence assessment? So low preparation and, a mindset that's just not in the right place for this. It's not something that, again, our profession is used to. I know when I was in school, I didn't have a lot of multiple choice tests. I'm not sure about the rest of you who are social workers on the call, but this can be a new concept and can create quite a bit of anxiety. And so I think trying to figure out where that comes from and being able to address it is kind of what we're trying to do through this. But thank you for that question.
Lavina, I have a question. This is Jane Holzrichter. How are you able to measure a mindset?
Through a series of questions, and this is not ASWB's expertise. Again, it's Fifth Theory's expertise. So this is something that these researchers have been doing for years of looking at how folks are preparing, what their thinking is going into the exam. So there's a multitude of questions. It's kind of like a self-assessment that kind of gets into the mind of the test taker and helps to understand, what they're thinking and what they're feeling.
Thank you.
The information about the fifth theory indicated that it was a self-assessment followed by recommendations. Then what kinds of recommendations are they making to people who show a problem with mindset or preparation?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. There are some videos that they can watch. There are also they set them up kind of with a portfolio depending on what would be most useful for them. Some videos, some are kind of self monitoring techniques, talking like positive self-talk, things like that, that they go through with them. So they give them a variety of kind of tools that they can use to assist them. And we have, ASWB itself, again, we're not conducting this research, but we are reaching back out to folks who have gone through this program to see if they were if they felt like it helped them, if they at least had the perception that they felt like it helped them. Again, we haven't tied this back to pass rates yet, but over 70% of the people who participate in the program did feel as though it was helpful. So that gives us at least some, peace of mind that we're on the right track here with this part of the support, and we'll continue to do that.
Thank you. Do they are the educators, do they have access to this module or being able to use with their, I'm thinking, this would be useful for anyone, not just people who've already failed the test, which in itself affects your mindset when you're getting ready to take it again. So are these materials available to the educators? And also I'm wondering, how much uptake have you had of those free resources that you've offered to the educators?
Yeah, so as I said, we just piloted the program with people who were unsuccessful last year. Our plan is to open it up because we wanted to make sure that the volumes weren't going to overwhelm the company, I think. And so now that we see what it looks like and kind of, we believe that we're going to expand it out probably in the next 6 months or so to anyone who, is preparing to take the exam. So that would be the goal there. And that would mean, yes, that educators would have access to that. The educator resources, we have been really impressed with how much those have been downloaded, and educators have asked for those and said that they have been really positive. So we think that that's been a good thing. Again, we aren't charging anything for those resources. We used to have an online practice test that educators could use in the classroom that we would charge for access to. And we still have those online kind of exams that we're not charging for anymore for the for those educators to help their students kind of think about how the exam is structured.
Thank you.
Any other
questions?
I want to thank you also for presenting information today. As a composite board, we oversee 7 different professions. And so I get the opportunity to attend some of those National Association meetings with board members. The information that you shared today about sort of the development of the test and the resources that are available, that's quite a bit unique compared to some of the other professions in terms of their licensing examinations and resources. And so I want to say thank you and compliment you for making all that information available, and also for appearing today to spotlight some of that information. I think it's one thing to put it out there, but adding visibility to it is helpful for everyone. And so thank you for doing that. I did have a question. I know this advisory committee has talked about the examination a few times, and we've expressed interest in wanting to make sure that we're learning about the changes. Could you comment a little bit more about the shift in the multiple choice, going from 4-part multiple choice questions to the 3-part, and how that timeline is going?
I would love to. That was one of the things I know that you all have asked about in the past. And one of the things that ASWB began implementing last January, which was beginning to phase in 3-option multiple choice. And this is because in the testing industry, it has kind of been proven through multiple sets of research in this industry about how 4-option multiple choice questions are just as effective. 3 option are just as effective as 4 option multiple choice. And typically what happens is that 4th option, there's always a 4th option that just doesn't get picked. And so essentially you're putting a lot of time and energy into writing that option, into getting it into the system, for the candidate to sit down and have to process it when they're not going to choose it anyway. So it was a waste of resources almost. In order for the candidate to get to the right answer, they're going to go through the same process either way. And that 4th option was more of a distraction than actually them being able to process through the item and get to where they needed to be. So we began implementing 3 option last January. And as of, last year, we implemented about 12% of all items were 3 option. So we're phasing this in. So now this year we have about 25% that are 3 option. So next year, I'm guessing, I would imagine it'll be closer to 50%. So we're probably going to be looking at that implementation of the 2026 competence assessment for them to be fully 3 option, because we have to gather data on them, before we can use them. So that's another piece, is we want to make sure that they are behaving the way they should be behaving and not causing any issues with being unfair to any test takers. So we have to test them first before we can integrate them. So that's some of the work that we're doing.
Okay, thank you. And I was excited to hear about, looking into the future in terms of assessments and exploring the possibility of doing modules instead of doing the test all at one time. I know that there are pros and cons with both scenarios. I'm a licensed attorney, so I had to pass the bar exam to become licensed in Kansas. And that can be intimidating to have a test that long and everything riding on one test. On the other hand, it can be nice to knock everything out at once for individuals who might want to do that. But I know that there are some other fields that have broken it down, and so you have the modules. And so it's not all a pass or fail kind of scenario. It's you can divide and conquer. And so I'm curious to kind of learn how that conversation progresses. I don't know if it would be feasible to continue to offer both options to people, but I'm curious to kind of hear more updates on that as you go along and explore that as an idea.
Happy to share more as we continue to evolve this thought. And I think it really does kind of philosophically harken back to social workers trying to be as strengths focused as possible. If you've passed one section, you should be able to move on. And so that's kind of the, without having to be faced with it again. And I think too, with the repeat test takers, our hope would be to be able to reduce that, that fee for that retake as well. So that you're not having to pay that huge fee again every single time you retest. So there are multiple things we're trying to do with one initiative, if you will, as well.
Any other thoughts or questions?
I just want to say thank you. I think you've made some huge strides in helping our profession be successful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, if there's no other questions or comments, thank you, Lavina and Megan, for joining us and sharing that information. It is something we've talked about a number of times and have been concerned about, and it's great to see the progress that's being made to address some of the discrepancies that were identified in the research. Thank you, and we'll look for the census and definitely promote it amongst social workers in Kansas.
Awesome. That sounds wonderful. You all take care. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for having us.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for coming. Okay. Any other comments or questions that you might want to have in our notes for future reference from that presentation? I guess one thing I didn't hear a clear, these are the things that we're doing to address these particular groups. They talked broadly about those that did not pass. But I didn't hear the focus, this particular group that has a lower pass rate, or this particular group that has a lower pass rate. We've identified these factors that are specific to those groups. Like, for example, one of them was people over 50. That was one of the subgroups that had a lower pass rate. And I'd like to see some targeted, specific data about why that particular group has a lower pass rate, et cetera. So that would be something I'd want to hear more about going forward. Anything else? Okay, well, the next thing on our agenda is to review and approve the minutes from last advisory committee meeting, which was on December 13th. Have you had a chance to look those over, or take a minute to do so now? And then I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes, or any amendments that you.
This is Leanne. I approved. I have a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Okay,
I'll second. This is Jane.
thank you, Jane. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Same sign. Okay, the minutes are adopted. Thank you. Now we're going to hear from David, the Executive Director's report. Take it away, David.
Thank you, Cynthia. And before I get into my report, I did want to mention Sarah Behrens was able to log into the meeting during the presentation, so
Oh,
she's
good.
well today as well.
Welcome, Sarah.
In terms of my report, I'll start with some agency operations updates, and then we'll talk about some items from the most recent board meeting to make sure you're aware of some of those items as well. And then we'll just talk about some general legislative updates. So starting first with operations, I want to make you aware of some of the things that may not have as much visibility as other items. This last year, there's been a focus from the executive branch agencies to work on a lot of the infrastructure to support agencies. One of those has been to build a continuity of operations plans. So every state agency under the executive branch was charged to create a robust continuity of operations plan. And this was not just a document that was a few pages long, in case of emergency. This was more of a time inducive operation where we were actually working with the Department for Emergency Management and plugging information in terms of identifying what are our core functions as an agency, some of the things that we would want to make sure we set up in a quick time frame if we were to have a disaster here in the state of Kansas, and then identifying staff members and their key responsibilities, and then what technology we would need to utilize if we needed to relocate to another location temporarily. And so we did spend quite a bit of time working with that entity and put together a plan. Those plans had to be reviewed and scored, and I'm happy to report that our plan was approved. We did receive a sufficient score on that. We'll probably make some additional changes to that over the course of the year, but want to make sure that if you do hear reference to that, the BSRB is in good shape concerning that item. Additionally, there have been a number of changes to building security for state buildings here in Kansas. I know the state is looking at making sure that Capitol Complex and other buildings close here in the state of Kansas are secure. And so there have been a number of changes behind the scenes. And so since most of our meetings are virtual, you may not actually see a lot of those items, but it is making the staff and other operations here more secure. So we're happy to see them making progress on that front. And then also it's important that you know that the information that we have here is secure. And so there has been also a push in terms of IT security for executive branch agencies. You may have heard some issues recently with the judicial branch and an attack that they underwent. But executive branch agencies, a lot of them have been undergoing audits by the Legislative Division of Post Audit to make sure that they have good security awareness procedures in place. If something were to happen, do they have a good plan in terms of reviewing their policies? And so we currently are putting more focus on IT security, but we were part of an audit last spring and we did quite well in that audit. And so just want to let you know about some of those changes that you may not see. They may not be visible, but they are still important and require staff time from the BSRB to make sure we're accomplishing those items. Another item I wanted to update you about is we are trying to take another step forward in terms of scanning our documents. We still have quite a bit of paper records here at the office. And while staff members do have traditional responsibilities over the licensing side of the office and then also the investigation of complaints, um, we are trying to move forward in terms of transitioning from storing a lot of our records in paper form to storing them electronically. And part of that process I had mentioned in the past was changing our document retention schedule to shorten the length of time we had to hold those records here before we sent them to archive at the Historical Society. We have been able to move about 8 years of paper records to the Historical Society, which has cleared up quite a bit of space. The next step is that we are starting to scan some of our paper records to make sure that we have a good process set up for that. And so the next step would be to request approval from the appropriate body for us to store things electronically. But in preparation for that, we're making sure that our scans are of good quality, that we have adequate backups in the right locations. And so we're making sure that the steps are in place before we would want to make that jump. But I think we're moving forward and good progress on that front. And then the last operations update I'll let you know about. So Leslie Allen and I, every year we focus on outreach in terms of the schools that have programs over the professions that we regulate. And over the last few years, a lot of these presentations we offer to schools have been virtual presentations over Zoom because of the pandemic and then also because of scheduling. But we are trying to make more of an effort this year to do a lot more of these in person and really connect with members from those schools and then meet more of the students who will one day become professionals in this area. So we've set up a lot of appointments on the calendar already. We're trying to set up more while we're juggling the legislative responsibilities, but looking forward to visiting with those schools here this spring and then also additional ones which we're starting to plan in the fall as well. Moving next to some items from the last board meeting, the board met most recently on January 12th, 2024. One of the items is that the board received public comment from Tanya Rickliff, who is the board president of the National Association of Social Work chapter here in Kansas. And Ms. Rickliff did request the support from the board on legislation on a multi-state compact for social workers if it was introduced this year. And the board discussed that request and decided to support the compact legislation, knowing that there would need to be some issues resolved to implement that compact, one of which has to do with fees for multi-state licensing. We've talked a little bit about that compact, and we can continue to discuss that topic, but essentially this compact is designed differently than the other professions that have done compacts so far. The social work compact would allow states to begin to issue multi-state licenses in addition to their existing single state licenses. So right now, all states can issue a license to practice in your home state. This would also allow states to begin to offer multi-state licenses. And so once those multi-state licenses were active, with the compact becoming active, you would be able to not only practice in your home state, but also in any other states that are part of the compact. So it would be a tremendous benefit to licensees that some of them have multiple licenses in different states. However, the BSRB has quite a number of individuals living outside of the state that currently have a social work license in Kansas. Just to give you some of those numbers, we currently license about 8,290 social workers here in Kansas. So about 8,300 almost. But of that amount, about 1,794 or 1,800 live outside of the state of Kansas. So if the compact passes and then ultimately becomes effective, we would expect that those individuals living in other states that currently are licensed in Kansas would let those licenses expire and then practice under a multi-state license in their home state. Well, what that would mean for the BSRB is that our license revenue is working on a balance. And so we bring in licensing fees and then we operate based on the funding that we receive from those licensing fees. And so losing over 20% of our license fee revenue from those out-of-state licenses going away would create quite an impact on the budget of the BSRB. It's estimated that that would be an impact of about $150,000 every 2 years because the licenses are about 2 years. So prorated, it would be about a loss of $75,000 every year. Now that assumes those states join the compact, and then individuals who are currently licensed probably would not discontinue their license until the compact was passed and their license expired. But over the long haul, that is kind of what we would expect. So that's an item that would need to be resolved. And Cynthia, I saw that you had a question on that.
Yeah, I think you just addressed it. Not all of those 1,800 would be in states that have also passed the compact yet. So they wouldn't all necessarily be able to get a multi-state license until their states adopted the multi-state. But eventually, that would probably be the case, that they would
Right.
all
Yeah,
be
and we,
eligible for a multi-state somewhere else.
that's what I expect. When we look at the other compacts, the one for psychology, SciPac, and the professional counseling compact, I believe that SciPac is somewhere close to about 38 or 39 states, and professional counseling currently, even though it's not operational yet, it's still working on the details. I think they're up to about 35 or so. So the vast majority of states are joining these compacts, and the ones that are most relevant to us in terms of our license totals generally are the bordering states like Missouri. And Missouri was the first state to join the social work compact. And so for us, even though we do have, it's interesting, if you look at our license totals and look at all the different states, we do have, a handful of individuals, maybe one in Alaska or one in, New Hampshire or Vermont, but the majority of them tend to be on bordering states or surrounding states. And so I do think most of those states will join the compact. Now it depends on how quickly they join and how quickly this compact will become effective. But that is something to kind of balance out. And so we are in the process of talking to some of the other states that are considering legislation to see what their approach is on this. And there was a question in the survey we'll talk about later on today, just to see how much interest there is on individuals maybe pursuing a multi-state license. But that was an item for the board, knowing that this would need to be kind of worked through for implementation if the compact did pass. And then the other item has to do with the social work multi-state compact requires passage of a background check with fingerprinting for individuals to be able to practice under the compact. And Kansas does not currently require that as a condition of licensure. And so this would be something that would need to be set up for at least those individuals who would be wanting to practice under the compact. And so those two items need to be kind of worked through. But the board did choose to support the compact, knowing that there were some logistics to kind of work through on that front. Another item from that board meeting on January 12th, the board did speak more about a possible agreement with a company called CE Broker. This is a company that has reached agreements already with the Board of Nursing and the Board of Healing Arts in Kansas. And it's a company that essentially works with licensing boards to allow licensees to opt in to create an account. It's a free account, and the agreement with Kansas or the BSRB would be free as well. So basically, they offer free services to any licensee who wants to use their platform to upload documentation of continuing education hours they have completed and also assign them in specific categories. And so the benefit is that when you renew your license, at that time you do an attestation that says I've completed all of my hours. And if you are pulled for audit, which 10% randomly are pulled for audit at the time of renewal, the BSRB, instead of contacting you and asking you to send your materials in for review to confirm that you've passed or taken all those hours, we would be able to log into the eBroker portal, verify the hours electronically, and the audit would be completed very quickly. So it would be a benefit. And also, we're moving away from being a society that stores a lot of information in paper form, just the need for space, but also in case there's any issues with losing documentation. So there's also some security there too as well. So the board is supportive of moving forward to a contract with the eBroker as long as we can work out the logistics. I've been working with our legal counsel to make sure the terminology works in a way that is good for the state, and then also been working with our IT provider, the Office of Information Technology Services, to make sure that any data sharing agreement would be approved by the state of Kansas and would be okay. But the important thing right now for licensees, this is something that would be not right away, but it would be an optional tool. Whenever it would launch, we would send a message out to all licensees, letting them know about this new resource available to them, and maybe even encourage them to go ahead and create an account. The way that this company profits is that they do have higher level tiers that are paid services, but they are completely optional. And they just have enough individuals to sign up for the free account and then later on choose to do the paid account. And so that's how they get their money in terms of doing their operating. But in terms of most people under the BSRB, any individual would be able to do it for free. So, Cynthia, you had a question?
Yeah, or just a comment. They also offer a CEU. They have links to lots of different CEUs, and they make some money that way too. I'm sure they get they get some kind of fee from those CE companies to feature their offerings. But it's convenient for the user because they know what categories we need CEs in, and they will offer those, as you go along. Whenever you add your CEs that you've done, they'll give you a list of things that you still need to complete to meet those requirements. So that would be ethics, or 3 hours of ethics, and we don't have to do diagnosis and treatment anymore after last year, but 6
Well,
hours of.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt you, Cynthia. Yeah, the diagnosis and treatment hours are still a requirement. That will change as of July 1st, 2025. And at that time, it will decrease from 6 hours down to 3 hours. So there will still be a requirement, but it'll decrease. But that won't start until July 1st of 2025.
Thanks.
And as I've been talking more with the individuals from CE Broker, basically one other tool that they would offer is they would connect with our renewal portal. So at the time that someone has a CE Broker account, at the time that they go in to do their renewal, there would be a way for them to check to see if they have documentation for all of their CEs for the period. And if they don't have documentation in CE Broker for that, there would be a little warning that would pop up that says you're confirming that you have all of your hours complete, but based on what we have available to us, it looks like you're lacking some hours. And so at that point, people would be able to go to CE Broker or other individual companies and find those CEs to complete those. But that would be sort of a check. Now it does rely on people making sure they upload all that documentation. So I can see some scenarios where some people may sign up for it, start to upload their documents, but then not do it over the course of the entire time period. And so it probably would work to people's best advantage if they did it continuously, but I know, there will be some times when that happens, but it won't stop people from not being able to renew their license. It will still let them move forward. It's just kind of a warning that says, you might want to check to make sure before you do this. And that is to the benefit of the licensee too, because if you do an attestation and say, I completed all my hours, and then it turns out that you haven't, it's a violation of unprofessional conduct. And so we want to make sure that we're helping people with that process too. So, well, seems like that will be moving forward. We're just working on some of the logistics, but we'll keep the board updated as we go forward with that. Don't have a timeline in terms of when that would be implemented, but maybe sometime in the next year. But it could be a little ways out. So. And then another item in terms of the board discussion, background checks for licensees. The board does have authority in statute to require background checks. So this was passed in legislation back in 2016, but there was never an action by the board to put forward regulations to specifically require that of certain licensee groups. However, a number of other states already require it as a condition of licensure, and these compacts are requiring it kind of uniformly in each of the compacts that are being joined for individuals wanting to practice in that. So there's a larger question for the board to consider in terms of overall licensure, whether to require this of all licensees or just make it available to the ones who want to practice under the compact. So that is something still to be determined. Another item for the board discussed at that meeting is the board did a delegation motion, which will allow us to move forward a little more quickly on some of the applications we receive from individuals from non-accredited programs. Currently, if someone applies for licensure and they attended a non-accredited program, we have to usually bring in an expert to review the program level requirements, the coursework level requirements to make sure those are substantially equivalent to what is required for licensure in Kansas. And that process can take some time. That expert provides a report back to the BSRB with an opinion. And then currently what we're doing is we're taking those reports and bringing them to the board. The board has a special meeting at the end of each month to review any individual applicants that require board review, such as people with felony convictions or people who could be denials for licensure. In the past, what we have been doing is bringing these expert reports to the board as well, even in situations to where it seemed like the expert report really resolved all the remaining issues. And so the board delegated to BSRB staff at that board meeting that if we get an expert report, it appears that there's no other issues that need to be resolved to license this person, then we would be able to move forward using that report without it having to go in front of the full board for a vote to license that person. So this will allow us to move forward more quickly on some of those cases If there's any cases that look like they could be a denial or that would require a board vote because of a statutory requirement, those would still go before the board, but this should allow us to move some of those cases forward more quickly. So that is some positive news, and appreciate that from the board. Now I'll move to some legislative updates. First, I'll talk about the agency's budget. The BSRB does have a budget that has to be approved by the legislature every year. We currently have state fiscal year 2024 that we're considering, and then next year would be state fiscal year 2025. We already have a budget that was approved for these 2 years, and so this year we were asked to make revised estimates on expenditures and revenue for these years. The legislature does consider the agency's budget separately in both the House and the Senate. And on the Senate side, we went before the Senate Transparency and Ethics Committee. They asked some questions to the agency, but were overall very complimentary to the agency, and noted that the agency works on a deficit currently. So we bring in less revenue than our expenditures, and that is by design. The board lowered a number of license fees for renewals and applications back in 2019, and that fee decrease started showing effects in 2020. So our fee fund balance is going down, and the committee expressed some concern to make sure that whenever we do drop the fee fund balance to a low enough amount that we would be able to raise the fees to create that balance again. And we do have that authority under the regulatory process. Of course, we would like to go as long as possible without having to raise any fees. But that is kind of where we're at. The Senate went ahead and approved the agency's budget for both years in terms of the limit on how much we can spend. And then it was reported out by a member of that committee in the Senate Ways and Means Committee. And so that has been approved by the Senate. The next step would be for it to appear in their appropriations bill. On the House side, the budget was heard by the House Higher Education Budget Committee. And the Budget Committee did ask a number of questions. The Budget Committee approved the same amounts that are in the governor's recommendation, which are also the amounts the agency had requested, but they added a notation to the report, and that report was asking for the board to provide a report back to the Budget Committee by February 29th with a report from the board on ways to lower fees, an additional amount to draw down the balance of the BSRB balance in the fee fund. And just for reference, our current budget in terms of expenditures is about $1.1 to $1.2 million per year. The balance in the fee fund currently is just a little over $2 million. So as I mentioned, we are operating at a deficit. That balance is going down, but based on that notation in the Budget Committee's report, they were asking us to come back with a report to reduce fees even more. And they didn't have a time frame on that. They also didn't have a set amount in terms of how much to decrease the ending balance in the fund. So when that went in front of House Appropriations Committee, the committee members did express some concern, noting the BSRB's budget was already going down by design. Some of the comments from that committee seem to indicate maybe about a year's worth of expenditures would be a good balance in the fund. So, but they didn't really give a definite amount. And they also indicated that they really haven't reached consensus on that for any other agencies. So it was a bit of an unusual recommendation. But because of that, we did have a special board meeting that was on Monday of this week, made the board aware of some of the history of the fee fund balances, some of those decreases in fees that happened back in 2019. There was also a decrease in the amount for some of the temporary license fees last year that the board put into place. So the board is watching these items. And then also it appeared that back in 2019, when some of those fee decreases took place, there was not a matching fee decrease for the behavior analyst renewal fees. And so at that meeting, the board discussed a number of different options. For consistency, the board did recommend moving forward with the fee decrease for the behavior analyst renewal fees to be consistent with those other fee decreases. But the board also noted that there's a number of different items that are currently being decided. One of those items is whether or not the BSRB will be able to mitigate the loss in out-of-state revenue for the social work compact. We're also waiting to really see the full impact of having joined the SIPAC compact a couple of years ago. All the psychologists renew in June of even numbered years. So after the end of June, we should have more of an idea in terms of how many out-of-state licensees we lost from the psychology profession. And then the professional counseling compact, that's not yet operational. So we don't really have a good grasp in terms of how many out-of-state licensees we will lose for that compact. And so there's a number of factors So we're also trying to gather information on fees in other states to be able to compare the BSRB fees to other states to see if we're in alignment, if we are too high in any area. But finding that information is very challenging. So I repurposed staff for about the last week and a half to research those amounts. We were able to get mostly good information for the psychology profession, but we received incomplete information on a number of others. So we'll be working on gathering that information up for the board to review. And then the board will be able to kind of study this further and then make additional recommendations on fee decreases prior to submitting our budget in the fall of next year. So moving forward on looking at additional fee decreases, but also don't want to put the agency in a position by decreasing fees too much that we will have to come back and increase fees in a real short period of time. There's also a number of other factors. At that board meeting on the 12th, the board did discuss possibly switching to a new licensing platform. There is a state provider of new licensing systems that could do some beneficial things for the agency in terms of linking up services. But to move to a new system, there is a one-time implementation cost of probably over $200,000. So there's a number of other options in terms of ways to really make the agency more productive and efficient. There's a lot of things to consider. So the board will be evaluating these things, but that is kind of where we're at right now. And so the House did pass out of House Appropriations the agency's budget with the same amount. There is that report that is due back on February 29th. So I will be drafting that report and then submitting it to the committee by the deadline. In terms of other items, we do have a number of regulations going through the process for your committee. One of these regulations deals with the existing language on in-residence requirements for applicants from non-accredited schools. We were able to get approval for 11 regulations to move forward with the public comment time period, and that is open currently. It will close in March, and we do have a public hearing on those regulatory proposed changes that is scheduled for March 26, 2024. That is at the BSRB office. It's usually just a 1-hour meeting for anybody who wants to come in person and provide additional feedback, but individuals can provide electronic feedback anytime now during the 60-day public comment time period. At the conclusion of that public comment time period, the board will be able to do a roll call vote to formally adopt those proposed changes or make any other further adjustments. And so excited to move forward on those regulations. It does take quite a bit of time to get those moved forward, but it should help us be able to license some additional individuals based on some of those changes. And then there's been a number of bills that have been introduced before the legislature this year. I just want to highlight a few of these bills. Some of these bills are in committee right now. Some of these bills have already received hearings and are being worked. But I do want to make you aware there is a bill that would expand the definition of peer support counseling sessions and the rules of evidence. That is House Bill 2557, and it is in the House Judiciary Committee. There's a bill on certified community mental health clinics that they be granted a renewal certification if such programs and treatments have been previously certified or accredited. That is House Bill 2578 in the House Health and Human Services Committee. There was a bill requiring the Secretary of the Department for Aging and Disability Services to reimburse counties for the certain costs when a person is in a county jail awaiting examination, evaluation, or treatment for competency. That's Senate Bill 228 and the Senate Judiciary Committee. There is a bill that would add for-profit entities to the definition of qualified applicant in the Kansas Fights Addiction Act. That is Senate Bill 307, and it was in the House Appropriations Committee. There is the Social Work Multi-State Compact Bill. That is House Bill 2484 and the House Health and Human Services Committee. We'll circle back around to that one with one more comment at the end. And then there's also a bill that would codify the Mental Health Intervention Team Program administered by the Kansas Department for Aging and Disability Services. That is House Bill 2669. There's a bill that would establish a statewide drug abuse resistance education or a DARE program educator position. And that establishes the Drug Abuse Resistance Education Fund and provides funding for such fund by annual transfers of state money. It is House Bill 2613 in the House Education Committee. There's a bill that would require certain persons on a third or subsequent conviction of driving under the influence to participate in a multidisciplinary model of services for substance use disorders. That is House Bill 2601 and the House Corrections and Juvenile Justice Committee. There is a bill that would involve prior authorizations and the use of prior authorizations in healthcare. That is House Bill 2713 that has just recently been introduced. There is a bill that would exempt military members and military spouses from paying all occupational licensing fees. That is House Bill 2745. There is also a bill that would license art therapists, and that is House Bill 2756. And just recently, I was also made aware of a couple new bills that were introduced over just the last few days. And I thought I'd highlight a couple of those for you as well. One of those bills would basically prohibit healthcare services to minors without parental consent. And that is House Bill 2793. It's a one-page bill, but in terms of defining healthcare providers, it seems limited to the BSRB, individuals who are licensed by the BSRB, as well as the Board of Nursing. And it does not include individuals licensed by the Board of Healing Arts. So it's a bit of an unusual bill, but that bill again is House Bill 2793. There's also a bill on enabling state agencies like the BSRB to do background checks. It's Senate Bill 491, but it mainly is trying to clean up some of the existing statutory language and make sure that what the federal government requires, agencies are able to accomplish, and making sure that the information from those background checks would be not subject to the open records request. So in terms of the bill on the compact, that is House Bill 2484, it received a hearing back on January 23rd. It was worked in committee yesterday. The original draft of the bill included the language for the compact that all states have to pass. There was an additional section which included the fees for the BSRB, the fee statute, and had a new carve out for the BSRB to be able to license individuals at the bachelor's level, master's level, and clinical level with a multi-state license, and it sets the cap for those fees for those levels of multi-state licenses. Yesterday in committee, Representative Ruiz did make a couple of amendments when that bill was being worked. I have not seen the language of these amendments. They were just described verbally. We were not aware of these amendments ahead of the time they were working the bill, and they're not posted on the legislature's website yet. But one of the items seemed to involve more requirements for background checks and maybe some standard language for that. At this time, I don't know if that language would just require this for people under the compact or for all social workers, but I'm hoping to see that language soon so I can have a better understanding of what that amendment was trying to accomplish. And then the other amendment was removing the language from the fee statute of the BSRB to be able to charge a fee for those 3 new levels of licensure. And instead, there's some odd language that talks about having a $25 privilege fee for this compact, which is very unusual. It seems like it's kind of using language similar to other compacts that have been passed, but those compacts were designed very differently than this existing multi-state compact. So I'm honestly not sure how that would apply to the existing multi-state setup that this compact would envision. So it does create quite a new wrinkle and some challenges in terms of trying to figure out how that would work, but wanted to make you aware that those items were passed. The committee did ask a question about whether this would change the fiscal impact of the bill. They were informed by the chair of the committee that they usually don't have that information at this point and they should just move forward and pass the bill. So they did. As I said, we were not really consulted about these changes. I have not seen them, so I don't know the full effect, but I do think that definitely these are items that we will need to have further conversations about if this bill does pass the House floor and moves to the Senate, just to make sure that we're able to appropriately have in place what we need to have in place to implement that multi-state compact. So at this point, I'll go ahead and end my report and see if there's any questions.
Do you know anything more about the no healthcare to minors bill, about who introduced it or what is that part of the anti-trans care for minors?
So the bill itself,
group?
It's only 1 page long. It is House Bill 2793. It was Representative Bryce was the individual who requested introduction, and it has been assigned by the Committee on Health and Human Services. I did notice that it has been scheduled for a hearing this Wednesday, or actually this Thursday on the 15th, I believe. And so it has been introduced very quickly and then almost immediately scheduled for a hearing. But I don't know any of the background of it. It just kind of was very recently introduced and then immediately scheduled for a hearing. But I did hear a comment in that committee yesterday that the chair is trying to provide a hearing for as many bills as possible this year. So I don't know if this bill will move forward. I don't know a lot of the background about this bill, but I did find it a little odd that the definition of healthcare provider in this bill specifically references individuals licensed by the Board of Nursing or the BSRB, but does not talk about any other types of medical or other health professionals in the state of Kansas. So that I found a bit odd, but that's all I know about that bill. So.
Well, the Board of Nursing licenses nurse practitioners, right?
Yes.
And so I think that those would likely be the providers that would be manning like a Planned Parenthood or, a clinic that might provide birth control. So maybe that was part of their target as well. And it says no, they can't provide health care for minors without parental consent. Right? That was what the bill was for.
Correct. Yeah, it indicates a healthcare provider shall not perform a healthcare service on a minor without the consent of such minor's parent. And then there's a number of existing statutes that would be repealed, and then there's some where it says these provisions shall not apply to some of these other statutes. So there's just not a lot of language in this bill. It's really just two short sections. It does say if someone violates this, the remedy is they would be subject to professional discipline from the healthcare provider's appropriate licensing agency. So it could result in more complaints potentially, but it's a little unclear kind of what this bill is directed towards. So.
That sounds like it would also apply then to school social workers seeing kids at school.
I know we recently had some correspondence on this bill from the Community Mental Health Center. And so it has become, I don't know if I want to say an issue, but there's certainly been some challenges, I think, that has brought it to our attention, because it's already gone out that we need to enact that age group within our, practice when it comes to minors.
You mean that you have to get parental consent to treat them?
Yes. If they come into a crisis, they can be seen at the crisis level, but then the executive director, CEO, clinical head, they have to reach out to the parent at that point. So it protects that emergency response. But yeah.
I wonder how that could apply if you've got a kid at school that is talking to a school counselor or a school social worker about abuse.
Well, it doesn't apply to our abuse laws. So doing therapy is one thing, but if you make a mandated report, that still trumps everything. But from the community mental health side, all releases have to be signed already.
Right. Okay. Any other questions or comments for David? Okay, thank you, David. There's a lot going on. Legislature's very busy right now. Okay, on to new business. And I'm excited to hear about the results of our survey. David, you want to tell us what's going on with that? It was open for 2 weeks, was that right?
It was open for a little over a week. And I'll go ahead and share my screen here and I'll pull up the report. I'll kind of walk through some of the report findings. So let's see. Okay, so you should be able to see the report here. So we'll go ahead and walk through a little of the information. This document is posted to the BSRB website. And we will go ahead and send an email out to all licensed social workers in the state of Kansas to let them know that it has been posted and there it is available for review. But in that report, it does kind of summarize the process of how this report came to be. So it mentions that in the fall, the advisory committee had requested a survey to collect input on a number of different topics, and it references some past surveys by the advisory committee back in 2015 and also in 2021. It talks about the drafting of questions and then review, and then it talks about the social work survey being sent out, and it references that back on beginning of January, the number of social workers licensed in Kansas was 8,288 at 4 levels of licensure, the associate, bachelor's, master's, and clinical. And so it was sent to all individuals who had a permanent. And so we had sent an email out to everyone, letting them know that they should be receiving a SurveyMonkey message with a link to the survey. And we were afraid that sending it out initially from SurveyMonkey might mean that it would go to individual spam accounts potentially. And so we wanted to make sure that they were aware the survey was coming so everybody could answer it. And so we did send that out on Friday and February 2nd, and let them know to finish it by Friday, February 9th. And so we sent a reminder out to everyone on Wednesday, February 7th, and then sort of a final reminder on Friday, February 9th. And then I did close the survey officially at noon on Saturday, February 10th. So I was in the office over the weekend trying to clean up these results and transfer them into this report. During the time that the survey was open for responses, we had 2,716 social workers complete the survey, which I was very, very happy to see.
Awesome. Wow.
Yeah, last time we had, a little bit less social workers, but we had a little over 1,000 responses, which was still a good number, but we had nearly 3 times that amount for the social work survey this time. And so really happy with how many social workers chose to take the survey and provide input for us. And so in the report, there were certain questions which asked for a multiple choice response, some that asked for an open-ended response. And so when there were open-ended responses, I tended to leave most of the exact phrasing so that you could review those responses. So we'll just go ahead and dive in and kind of talk about these questions in the survey and some of the responses we got. The first question was, in what county or counties do you practice social work? And so the way individuals answered this varied greatly. But one thing we were trying to do is we were trying to capture, we know some people practice in several different counties, and so asking them just one may not be the best representation. But also some individuals work out of state, because we do have almost 1,800 individuals who live in other states that practice. And so we wanted to make sure we captured those counties as well, whether they're practicing in Kansas or whether they're practicing in other states. And so we did receive quite a bit of feedback from those individuals. I did clean it up and alphabetize it. I grouped the ones that answered exactly the same, but if there were differences, I tended to leave some of those separate so you could review those. And if you're looking for a specific county, this would also allow you to search for that county and see if that county was represented in the survey. So had individuals answer that question. And then the next question was a multiple choice question. And it said, do you practice in a predominantly urban area, rural area, or frontier area? And we did choose to define those terms to help individuals understand those a little bit better. So urban was defined as a high population size, rural, a low population size, but frontier, low population size, and high geographic remoteness. And those are just a general definition. And so we asked individuals to provide those responses, and the majority of individuals who answered the survey did practice mostly in urban settings. However, there was good representation, almost 30% from rural settings as well. So happy to see kind of a blend and see that there was representation by individuals in different areas there. Question 3 asked, what is the highest level of social work license you have obtained in Kansas? And so we do have 4 levels of license. We have not been able to issue new licenses at the associate level in over 40 years, but we have allowed those individuals who previously did have a license at that level to continue to renew their license. And that number is down to 4 associate social workers, but we did have 3 of them complete the survey. There were 323 individuals who indicated that they were a bachelor's level social worker, 1,288 individuals with a master's social work, and then a little over 1,000 individuals with a clinical level license there as well. 7 individuals preferred not to answer the question. The next question we asked about, we indicated this was for bachelor's level social work licensees. We provided some information about the pending bill on the social work multi-state compact, and that is House Bill 2484. We noted that it was in front of Kansas and could potentially pass this legislative session. We noted that according to the information for the compact website, the eligibility criteria list certain elements. And then we also listed the price of an existing LBSW license in Kansas and also the price of a 2-year renewal. And we basically said if these amounts were consistent for the single state license and it was twice the amount of a single state for a multi-state license, would you be interested in moving from a single state to a multi-state license? And for the bachelor's level, the responses we had were that almost 50%, even if the amounts were that high, would be interested in moving. About 18% said no. There were about 20% that were unsure, and then about 14% chose not to answer. And I will tell you this, when you're looking at the question before that noted the number of individuals at each license level, you may see how many people confirm that they were a bachelor social worker or master's or clinical. We were unable to limit these questions just to those individuals. So we did direct them, this is a question just for bachelor's level social worker, but some of the responses we got back were in excess of that amount. We think some people missed that item and went ahead and answered the question anyway. But just for the validity of the survey, I will say that the responses we sent out were specific to each individual's email address with the BSRB. So we know that it was answered by those licensed social workers, and there is a tool in place to make sure that no one answered the survey more than once. So while the amounts for these questions may be a bit different based on these different license levels, we know that these were all answered by social workers. But for the bachelor's level social worker license, what we received was that almost half would be interested in moving and another 20% were unsure, but may be interested in moving. And I think in terms of looking at that price point, the idea in mind was that would sort of be the highest we would need to charge for a multi-state license. It doesn't mean that we would want to charge that amount or that we would plan to charge that amount, but I think it was important to kind of set that as the ceiling and say, even if it was this amount, would you still be interested? And it seems like a lot of social workers at the bachelor's level would be. And we did talk about if we have input from a lot of people, we would be able to set those amounts at much lower to try to mitigate the lost revenue from losing those out-of-state licensees. So that was a really positive response, in my opinion. Question 5 talked about the master's level social workers, and we asked similar questions. We outlined the provisions of the compact, the requirements to practice, and then also the amounts that are currently for a single state license. And basically, if those amounts were doubled, would you be interested in moving to a multi-state license? And the response for the master's level was over 60%, almost 62% said yes, we would be interested in moving from a single state to a multi-state, even at the higher cost. 16 or so percent said no, and then about 20% said that they were unsure. And so if you move to the next question, question 6, at the clinical level of licensure, same question, but it outlines the different responsibilities and requirements. And then again, if the amounts were doubled for a multi-state license, would you be interested in moving? And even higher amount indicated positive responses. So about 67% indicated they would want to move to a multi-state license. 12% said no, and then about 14% said that they were unsure. So what we see from this is the largest license groups are the bachelor or the master's and the clinical. And it seems like there is a definitely the majority of individuals who responded to the survey would be interested in moving. And so that is really positive. The next question was question 7. And this was a question for all social workers. Should Kansas discontinue requiring passage of a national examination as a license requirement for bachelor's level permanent social work license? And so we did note that this was a change. It would require a change to law, and that also the compact currently requires passage of a national examination for this level of multi-state license. What we found is that when we asked people, should we discontinue requiring passage of an examination as a license, The answer we found from most individuals on this question was no. I believe there were 73% that responded no. And then in terms of yes, the information we received back was about 13% said that we should discontinue requiring that as a condition of licensure, and another 11% indicated that they were unsure. For the master's level social work permanent license, we asked the same question, but made this available to both the master's level and clinical level social workers. Should Kansas discontinue requiring passage of a national examination as a condition of licensure for a master's level permanent social work license? The answer we received on this question was that 78% said no. We should not discontinue requiring that as a condition of licensure. 10% said yes, we should discontinue requiring that. And then about 6 to 7% were unsure. For the clinical level of social work license, we basically asked the same question, and we said, should we discontinue requiring passage of a national examination as a requirement for clinical level license? And 63 or 64% said no. 12% said yes, and then about 5% said that they were unsure. So the results from all three levels appear to support that social work licensure or social workers licensed in Kansas are not supportive of discontinuing that as a requirement for licensure based on the amounts that I've kind of highlighted here. In terms of question 10, we asked, if you provided clinical level supervision to practitioners over the last 2 years, have you provided any supervision by televideo rather than in person? Majority of people do not provide supervision, so that made up the largest responders to the survey. But I think if you can focus on the yes and the no, what you can see here is that there were about 277 of the responders who indicated that they have done television or supervision by televideo, but 149 have not. And I thought this was kind of interesting. Basically, this kind of says that of the people who responded to the survey, of the ones that provided clinical level supervision, while 2/3 about were doing at least some supervision by televideo, there was another third that was not. They were doing supervision still in person. I thought that was kind of interesting. The next question, question 11, if you provided clinical level supervision by televideo over the last 2 years, based on your experiences, do you believe this flexibility has resulted in mostly positive changes, mostly negative changes, or something else? Based on what you have observed, has the ability to provide supervision remotely helped individuals better access supervision? Please explain. And we did try to clean up some of the responses for spelling and grammar and then alphabetize them. But basically, I wanted to let you see all of the individual responses. And so I think in general, the comments were positive, that the movement to televideo has resulted in a number of positive changes, although this was not true for everyone who responded to the survey. So as time allows, I'd recommend to go ahead and read through the responses people provided in terms of that question. So there were quite a few individuals who did answer that question. So I did want to make sure to, as much as possible, keep their existing language for you to review. So there are about 200 and almost 70 individual responses for that question. On question 12, if you received clinical level supervision, and this has to do with receiving clinical level supervision, have you received any supervision by televideo rather than in person? And basically on this, of the individuals who responded, 444 have received at least some of it supervision by televideo, but 172 did not. They were receiving all their supervision by televideo. One thing I will point out here, as with the supervisors, basically about 1/3 were providing supervision only in person, but about 2/3 were at least doing some of it by televideo. But in terms of receiving the supervision, the individuals who received it, there's a higher ratio that are receiving at least some of it by televideo than just solely doing it in person. So I thought that was kind of interesting as well. Question 13 asked, if you received clinical level supervision by televideo over the past 2 years, do you believe the quality of supervision provided remotely has been mostly positive, mostly negative, or something else? Has the ability to receive supervision remotely helped with accessing supervisors? Please explain. And again, as with the last question, there were a lot of responses. Most of the responses that I was able to review appeared to be positive, but not all. So there are some different opinions and perspectives. And so I would recommend reading through these responses as well. It could help us identify some potential issues to be addressed in the future, or it could give us some more insight in terms of why individuals responded positively in certain ways. And so on this one, there were even more responses back. I did get 395 unique responses to this. And I did group the ones that said exactly the same thing, but when they had different language, I went ahead and tried to preserve the specific language in response to those survey questions. And then the last question on the survey, question 14, Kansas currently requires 40 hours of continuing education every 2-year license period for each level of permanent social work license. Do you believe lowering the required number of hours from 40 hours to 30 hours would negatively affect professionalism and safe practice? And the answer to this one, the majority of individuals said no. Almost 72% said it would not negatively affect professionalism and safe practice. 18.6% said yes, and then about 8.7% said that they were unsure. And while we didn't have just a general comment section on the survey, I did receive a handful of emails from individuals. And so I did want to highlight some additional comments I received as part of this process. I said when we received these comments that I would summarize their feedback and let the members of the advisory committee know about those comments. So one individual who responded to the survey stated they loved this approach and found that to be positive. One individual noted they have been licensed as a bachelor's level social worker for several decades, and they expressed discouragement with the lack of jobs available for social workers at the bachelor's and master's level of licensure. This individual expressed a request for a way to be able to advance to a higher level of license based on years of practice, noting that it would not be feasible for them to return to school and incur student loans. One individual asked if it would be permitted to share information on the survey on a social media group site. And I did respond to that individual and I said it would be perfectly fine to share information that we are doing a survey, but not to share the specific link because those were sent directly to each individual to take the survey for themselves. 2 individuals noted being unable to review the survey. And so I did follow up with them to see if they could take the survey in a different format or if there were other issues we could resolve with SurveyMonkey. One of those individuals did take me up on the offer, and so I was able to manually input their responses and they were included in the survey results. One individual did note difficulty answering the demographic question on the survey as he holds 2 different employment positions, and one job involves work in an urban setting while another job involves work throughout the entire state. So he noted he wanted to be responsive to the survey question, but he also wanted to provide this just for context as well. One individual expressed concern that the survey questions may be written in a misleading way and noted that they might have answered some questions differently if they did not read the question closely. This individual also expressed concern with being asked to provide feedback on topics such as the proposed multi-state compact without more detail being made clear, such as whether a person would need to pay a fee for a multi-state license if someone is already licensed in Kansas. One individual stated interest in learning the outcomes from the survey, specifically concerning the question on a potential decrease in continuing education hours. This individual expressed support for decreasing the required hours from 40 to 30 hours and noted that the workshops can be costly given social work salaries. So I did follow up with that person and informed them we would send out a message to all licensees once the report was available. And then another individual expressed concern regarding a possible decrease in professional standards, such as discontinuing national examinations or lowering continuing education hours from 40 hours to 30 hours. And that individual noted the social work community should be working on strengthening professional standards to better serve clients, given the need for ethics, advanced critical thinking, and communication skills. So I thought I would go ahead and just briefly go through this survey with you. There's definitely a lot to unpack here in terms of the responses, especially some of those open-ended responses from individuals. But I thought maybe going through this quickly would be helpful, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. This was a real quick turnaround, and in going through this, I did catch a couple of typos. So I probably will make a couple of corrections to this last page and then repost the survey. But I thought I might answer or open it up for questions and see if any individuals have any questions on the survey responses or any information we received back.
Well, I don't have a question, but I just want to thank you for spending your time on the weekend to put together this very comprehensive review of our results. And I'm delighted with the number of responses, and also that there were clear clear numbers, either favoring or not favoring each answer. It wasn't close. So I think that is really helpful for us in terms of guiding, what we may recommend back to the board, going down the road, that we have pretty expansive majorities on most of these answers. And I'm also very glad that we got a good mix of rural and urban social workers answering. Anybody else have a comment, question? I think going forward, I will ask for us all to review the individual responses that David's provided here, and before our next meeting, so that we can look at what recommendations we might want to make coming out of this survey.
Yes, thank you, David, for your time, for putting this together and getting it out and responses back in a timely manner. I think for us to be able to use data to move forward will be great.
Well, you're welcome. It was, wanted to carve out a little bit of time on Sunday for a different event, but I spent most of the day here in the office on Saturday, and then cleaned it up a bit more on Sunday, and then a little bit more on Monday. But yeah, I appreciate that. I think this is a really good tool to collect this feedback, and I did hear from people just verbally who expressed, they appreciated being asked these questions. I think it's hard to know what the majority of social workers in the state think on certain topics, but this was a nice opportunity for us to reach out to them. And I've mentioned the survey was being put together for the Social Work Advisory Committee, but I know a number of the other advisory committees, this has kind of spurred an interest to maybe create a similar survey for their professions. And so I think it will have a good effect in some other areas as well. And I know that the licensees understand too, this is not that we make decisions purely just by a majority opinion or feeling on a different matter. We are charged to protect the public. But I think sometimes, especially in legislative committees, you only hear from a small handful of people that represent a lot of different voices. And it's nice to be able to hear from those individuals themselves on a survey like this. So I was really encouraged by how many people took the survey. Of course, you would hope that every person would respond to a survey, but it was an optional survey, and getting nearly 3,000 people respond back to this was really, really positive, I thought.
All the effort we put into devising those questions and discussing them, I think it paid off.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, thank you again, David. And I think the next item under new business is to discuss possible changes to KAR 10226 program approval standards. Can you put that up for us, David?
Yes, I'll go ahead and share my screen here with that regulation. And I'll kind of explain why we're putting some focus and attention on this regulation as well. So KAR 102-2-6 is one of the educational regulations for the social work profession. At the most recent board meeting, one item the board discussed is that we have these regulations in place, and a number of them have not been adjusted in several years. And several years ago, in an attempt to help more people meet the standards for licensure, there were certain program level requirements or coursework level requirements that were put into regulation to allow the board to evaluate someone specifically who came from a non-accredited school. But these program level requirements or coursework level requirements have been in place for a number of years, and it would be helpful to re-examine them, understanding that times have changed, technology has changed, and so it'd be good to kind of look through those again to see if those still are the best standards. And also thinking about it in terms of the board's role, if we do have an individual from a non-accredited program, if there is language in the regulation that says these are required from a person from a non-accredited school, if individuals don't meet those standards, the board may be put in a position to say, you meet all the other requirements, but your program was lacking this item, so we will have to deny you for licensure. And so, so for these items in here, it would be helpful to make sure that these are all necessary, in the opinion of the advisory committee and ultimately the board, that these are all necessary for someone to meet the standard for licensure. So I've pulled up a copy here of KAR 102-2-6, and I've presented the version here that is currently open for public comment because I know that there were some previous changes that were recommended to be made to this regulation. So this is the version with some strike-throughs and some new proposed language. And so maybe we can look at this, assuming that those changes would be approved by the board at the end of the public comment time period, and then looking next at some of the language on the program level requirements. And I've asked Leslie Allen, the Assistant Director and Licensing Manager for the board. She's the staff member who works with our licensing staff when they do these types of reviews, or where we work with experts to make sure that these requirements are all in place. I've asked her if she can kind of add some comments today too, to kind of point out which items we would like the advisory committee to be looking at for future meetings as we go through this and consider any possible changes. So Leslie, do you have any comments on this regulation for the social work profession?
Well, I don't have, we don't have that many non-accredited programs. So that's the first thing. The second thing is this was written so long ago. When we've updated it, and Dave, I didn't hear you, but talk about it. But the last time it was updated was like for residency. So prior to that, it had been updated last in 1997. So I don't know what kind of changes CSWE has made, and if you know how this differs from our requirements in the regulation. There are, you know, requirements for both bachelor's and master's, and then specifically some additional things for master's programs. But there is no coursework listed or competencies, which is very different from all the other regs. All of the other professions have more information for coursework or topics that should be covered in the coursework. And we don't have anything like that in social work.
And I know that there was a bill that passed last year that expanded kind of what we look at in terms of just as kind of a reminder for the social work programs that are trying to seek accreditation. That process can take about 3 to 3.5 years or 4 years. And so there's a period of time where programs are considered to be in candidacy for accreditation. And the board likely largely resolved that issue with being able to issue temporary licenses for applicants who graduate from programs that are in candidacy for accreditation. But these really are for individuals that are in sort of a third category where their program is not seeking accreditation, or potentially their program has lost accreditation. And so these requirements would need to be met alternatively. And if you look at the language here in section B, be recognized and approved by the board, an undergraduate or graduate social work program shall be accredited by the Council on Social Work Education, or CSWE, or shall be in substantial compliance with the following language. And then you have a list of specific program level requirements. So it may be helpful for preparation at the next advisory committee, if the advisory committee members could kind of look through these items here on the following pages as well, to see if these requirements still seem appropriate for conditions where these would need to be attained for someone to meet the requirements of licensure. And then one thing that I could do to assist the work of the advisory committee that I have done with another profession, so I have reached out to representatives from the national accrediting body for a different profession. And I've said, you know, of course, we have independent authority at the state level, but we would want to make sure that we're not requiring something in Kansas that would go above what a national accrediting body would require unless we have a really good reason to require that. And so I asked another accrediting body to review our alternative requirements for regulation to see if any of these items go above and beyond what they require in terms of their accreditation standards. And they were able to review that and provide a couple of comments. Or if we have specific items in mind where we could have kind of pointed questions, and we could say, we've done a review, and here's a few items that we have questions about. Does CSWE have requirements in these areas or not? And if so, what are your requirements in these areas? That might be another helpful approach to take on this too. So, um,
If we could get CSWE to do that comparison for us, that would be really helpful. So I would be in favor of you asking for that, as you did with the other profession. And if they're not willing or able to do it, then I think going through and picking out ones that we might have questions about and asking them to comment on those specifics would be the next level of analysis that we might attempt.
Okay.
What does anybody else think? One other thing, David, is to, on occasion, we get someone who got their degree many years ago, and they can't get the information to verify whether their program met these standards or not. So that might be I don't know if there could be a regulation that could cover that, that we could consider, but some way for people to, if it's after a certain number of years, I don't know what we can do in those cases, but I know we've had a couple of those that we've had to look at CAPA meetings.
Yeah, and one of the differences here, Leslie and I talked about this. The language for the social work profession is a little bit different than some of the other professions. So if you note here, it basically says their education would need to be accredited by CSWE or shall be in substantial compliance with the following standards. For some of the other professions, their education regulation says that they shall either receive their education from a program accredited by the national accrediting body or shall meet the following criteria. And so that's a little bit different in this language, because for those, it basically says either accredited program or you shall meet each of these following requirements. This language here for the social work profession says, or shall be in substantial compliance with the following standards. That substantial compliance language is a little bit unique compared to some of the other professions. So it does give us a little bit of flexibility to evaluate things like what you're referencing. And I know that it's a little tricky because I'm not sure the term substantial compliance is defined. So that would have to be a measuring type thing. But there is a little bit more flexibility here with social work than there are for other ones, where you basically have to meet all of those requirements. And if you don't, each of those could be a reason for the board to have to deny the license application.
Or on a few occasions, we're able to issue a temporary license or a provisional license while they get one or more courses that they're missing.
Yeah, and so the profession,
close.
Right. The other professions have not only this program level requirement language, but they also have coursework level requirements. And so if we do have an applicant who is close, but they're deficient on a few of the courses they need, and they can finish those within a year, the board could grant a provisional license and they can pursue that while they're finishing those existing courses. But your regulation is a little unique in that it does not include those coursework requirements. There's not a specified number of courses. And so if an individual came from a non-accredited school, we would be able to evaluate the program level requirements, but not the coursework level requirements.
Except for the psychotherapy class, I think is still, did that get left in?
It depends on the level of licensure, but
clinical.
If individuals are seeking clinical level of licensure, there is still that requirement in place.
Yeah.
So maybe some homework for the advisory committee, if you don't mind, kind of reviewing this and seeing about specifically these items in section B, and then maybe taking a look at section C as well. It's not a very long regulation. It's only about 7 pages, and one of those just has the history. So, but that would be helpful for us in terms of the discussion, and I'll talk to representatives from CSWE and see if they can add more input as well.
Okay, that would be great. Well, I'm aware that we have about 2 minutes left. So we can just note maybe the next item, which would be another homework item for all of us, to review and update the social work supervision manual that was created, I think, a number of years ago. David, do you know the history on that, of when
That's a great question. Leslie might be more aware of when it was originally created. I think it was last updated just a couple years ago, but I'm not sure if that was when it was originally created.
Okay, so and I think you attached that to our today's meeting notice, so you should have that in your email. If you can also read through that, then we can talk next time about how we might tackle revising that or adding to it as needed. And also apparently the ASWB Models Social Work Practice Act will be another thing on our agenda in the coming year to look at. We won't necessarily get to that at our next meeting.
Yeah. That document
Which
the ASWB has offered for states and jurisdictions to take a look at if you do want to re-examine your existing requirements compared to what maybe is being offered as best practice or trying to standardize that language.
I just wanted to add something about the manual. When we developed the manual, it had a lot more information from like or NASW or ASWB and things like that. And legal counsel said that we should focus on our statutes and regulations. So you'll note there's not a lot of extra what your thoughts are or what, what
commentary,
how
right.
ASWB defines something real, different than how we define things. So that's why it is the way it is. So I just thought I'd let you know why it didn't include all that other information.
Kind of spare. And so those might be questions we end up asking current legal counsel, is if there's things that we want to add to that or flesh out more, rather than just the bare bones. This is the requirement.
Right.
Okay. Well, I believe our next meeting is scheduled for April 9th at 10 a.m. Central. So I will look forward to seeing you all then. In the meantime, happy Mardi Gras and happy Valentine's Day tomorrow. Everybody have a good celebration.
I'll just put in a motion to end the meeting. Adjourn. Thank you.
And do we have a second?
This is Leanne. I second it.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Didn't think so. Everybody have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.